Welcome to the Depth Dive. Really glad you could join us. Today we're plunging into the world of musical education, specifically this innovative program called Triquetrae and its 14 core skills. Our mission really is to unpack how this unique approach aims for a truly deep, lifelong engagement with music, moving, way beyond those traditional performance-focused assessments.
Yeah, and it's a really important distinction to make, I think. If you think about standard music exams, sure, they give you a snapshot, but they can unfortunately end up pushing students towards just, well, rote learning, just mimicking what they hear, maybe. This older way, often very narrow in what it values, it frequently fails to build real understanding or, lasting ability. It can even lead to kids just dropping out altogether, losing interest. The Triquetrae program, though, is designed very differently. It's aiming for a genuine, enduring connection.
That makes so much sense. We've probably all seen that happen, haven't we? So let's unpack this Triquetrae thing a bit more. It's built on 14 foundational skills, and it's quite a list. We've got articulation, composition, form, listening, movement, musicology, presentation, posture, practicing, pitch, reading, rhythm, tempo, and tonality. Phew.
Right. And what's really at the heart of it, the core belief, is that a genuine lifelong love for music, it demands time, real effort to actually learn and internalize these essential skills. There just isn't a quick fix,
Yeah.
no superficial way to get to mastery that actually sticks.
So the emphasis really shifts away from that one-off performance towards ongoing individual growth. I like that. And it sounds like the program is committed to individual needs, right? With continuous assessment, instead of that severely limited examination process you mentioned. It sounds like it gives clear proof of progress, showing students are getting something foundational, something functional.
Exactly. It prioritizes what you might call secure knowledge over fleeting performance. It's about cultivating resilient musicianship, restorative even, fostering a love for music that lasts well beyond any exam. It's a pretty profound shift, really, equipping students for a lifetime with music.
Okay, let's really dive into these 14 skills then, starting with the ones that, well, bring the music to life. First up, articulation. Now, when we talk about articulation, we mean precisely how a note is played, yeah. Dictating its character, its impact, using techniques to change its length or volume or quality.
Precisely. That nuanced control is just fundamental. It's what makes music expressive beyond just, hitting the right notes at the right time. And what's fascinating, really fascinating, is the impact articulation has on how we feel when we listen. There was some recent research out of Macquarie University, I believe. It showed really compellingly the distinct emotional effects of, say, smooth, connected playing versus short, detached notes.
Oh, that's interesting. So what did they actually find? Was it just like happy versus sad or more subtle?
Well, the findings were quite nuanced, actually. They found that legato melodies, that's the smooth, connected style, people generally preferred those. They used words like cohesive, calming, even sad sometimes. Whereas staccato melodies, the short, detached ones, they were linked more with greater tension, energy, amusement, happiness, even surprise.
Wow, that's really specific. So beyond the technique itself, what's the key insight for how Triquetrae teaches this? How do they use that knowledge?
Well, the core insight is that articulation isn't just a technical exercise. It's about directly connecting sound to emotion. So the student becomes like an active investigator into the psychological impact of their own playing. They're not just performing notes. They're learning to tell a story with every little change in how they play a note. It turns a technical skill into something much deeper, almost like self-discovery through sound. So in Triquetrae, students are really encouraged to explore the full expressive range, legato, and staccato. They might be asked to describe how their playing feels, or even do little research projects, maybe asking family and friends how different articulations make them feel. It's very practical, real-world musical communication.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, moving on to composition skills. This feels like the real heart of musical creativity, doesn't it? Generating original ideas, maybe using traditional scores, maybe more graphic, personal ones.
Yeah, and I found something interesting about composition in the sources that it made me stop and think. You'd assume creativity is like front and center in music education, right? But some research suggests that often music teaching ends up prioritizing just reproducing existing pieces over actual creation, which is apparently quite different from, say, dance or visual arts, where making your own stuff is much more central.
That's a really big point. And I often wonder, what is the difference between composing something and just improvising on the spot?
That's a great question. There's a researcher, Kratis, who looked into this. He sort of suggested that improvisation is like composition, but performed immediately, no takebacks. And composition, conversely, is like improvisation, but with time. Time to adjust, reflect, tweak things. It's about building on what you already know or what you've learned. And Triquetrae's approach here isn't just about pure invention from scratch. It also encourages using existing musical ideas or techniques you've learned to maybe create your own version of a piece or let it inspire something totally new.
And thinking about creativity, it's just amazing how different musical tastes are across cultures, isn't it? I remember reading somewhere about like Spanish explorers and indigenous groups meeting, and apparently both sides found the other's music really quite jarring, almost noise. It really makes you question what we even mean by music.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Which leads nicely into, okay, so you've got these creative ideas. How do you structure them? That's where form skills come in. The blueprint, essentially.
Yeah, the blueprint or the musical map. That's a great way to put it. Organizing all the bits, melodies, harmonies, rhythms, so it makes sense as a whole piece.
Exactly. There's a scholar, Deborah Lee, who talks about musical form precisely like that as a system for organizing knowledge, for organizing the musical information. And, all music has some kind of form, just like our days have routines or structures. The key is figuring out what form a particular piece has. That gives you real insight into how the musical story unfolds, how it creates feelings or tells that story.
Okay, next up is listening skills. And there's a difference here, isn't there, between just hearing music in the background and actively listening with focus for a reason.
That's it, exactly. Passive listening versus active listening.
Mm-hmm.
And while young musicians can juggle lots of elements, it's often really helpful, especially at first, to focus on just one thing. Maybe just pitch, or the sound quality, the timbre of an instrument, or the overall form, or how loud and soft it gets, the dynamics. Focusing helps develop that specific skill, and creative listening experiences are vital too, exposing students to new sounds, new ideas, pushing their boundaries beyond just the music they play themselves.
Right. Now let's talk about movement skills. This seems so intuitive. Using your body to express or understand the music, it feels like a really natural learning cycle experience. Reflect, think, act.
Yeah, Luis Del Barrio wrote about this beautifully. He talked about how bringing movement into lessons just opens up new ways to understand music, to activate creativity. It often involves storytelling, developing rhythm through clapping, stamping, moving expressively. And there's research, too, by Robin, I think, showing profound physiological benefits. Moving to music boosts endorphins. It creates a calming effect. A bit like rocking a baby, apparently. It's quite primal.
That's incredible. And the Triquetrae program really uses this, right? With those kinesthetic phrases like jump the interval of a fifth, leap the fourth, span an octave,
No.
reach the seventh, skip the third, step the second, stretch the sixth.
Yeah.
Those phrases are fantastic for physically connecting with musical concepts, making them concrete. And that's just one side of it. The other aspect of movement is about the efficient physical actions you need to actually play an instrument fluently. That comes through repetition, building habits, aiming for it to become instinctive. So automatic, you could almost do it with your eyes closed. That's when you get real confidence and speed. It becomes muscle memory. Gotcha. Okay, shifting gears a bit to musicology skills. This is the why, what, where, when, who, how of music, right? Looking at how music connects to history, geography, society.
Yes, and Frank DeAndrea argued really strongly that knowing the history and the structure isn't just like an optional extra. He said it's absolutely essential for complete musical education. So Triquetrae weaves history, structure, different styles right into the lessons, alongside performance, analysis, even going to concerts. It aims for a really balanced view.
So practically speaking, how does that help a student playing a piece?
Well, asking those why, what, where questions about any piece or even a specific skill they're learning, it just gives such profound insights. It helps them make informed choices in their own playing. It turns the music from just notes on a page into, well, a piece of history, a cultural object.
Okay, next, presentation skills. Now, this can be a tricky one, right? Especially for students who might find performing really anxiety-inducing. So it's important to say presentation here means more than just a formal concert.
Absolutely crucial point. The definition used is broader, placing something before a person, an activity, or a specific period of time.
Okay.
So you can present your music just for yourself, during your own personal time, or, yes, before an audience, or even just as, say, background for another activity. And this is key. A music presentation can be a deeply private act. It can be about just immersing yourself in the sound in your own space without any judgment, without fear. That private internal experience, that's the bedrock. That's where confidence for any external sharing comes from.
Ah, I see. So understanding how music affects your own internal world is the first step. Before you can even think about sharing it effectively with others, build that inner sanctuary first.
Precisely. And it's presented as a learnable skill, something nurtured through the program's supportive approach. The aim is to build confidence so you can share your music, whatever sharing means for you.
Makes sense. Now, posture skills. Sounds simple how you hold your body, but it's fundamental, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely fundamental. Think of it as like the instrument's silent partner.
Hmm.
Good posture isn't just about looking right. It's about channeling your energy efficiently into the sound. It affects how your muscles work, how you breathe. Ultimately, the quality and the expression in every single note is the difference between just hitting a note and really shaping it with intention. Yeah. And consciously shifting your weight using different muscles, that can subtly but really powerfully change the sound, the emphasis.
Okay, moving to practicing skills. This is framed as more than just repetition, right? It's a sophisticated skill for forming habits, perfecting things, learning new techniques, polishing pieces. I remember my own lessons.
Yeah.
Practice felt like a chore until I realized it was the only way to actually play the cool stuff I wanted to play. It really is about taking ownership, isn't it?
That's so true. And within Triquetrae, practice is really seen as a form of personal development. They encourage using tools like learning journals, practice notebooks, personalized plans, things that empower students to reflect on their practice, to engage with it thoughtfully, and really own their journey. Ultimately, practice is, well, it's the crucible. It's where habits form and skills really mature.
Okay, next up, pitch skills. This is more than just knowing if a note is generally high or low, right?
Definitely. It's about discerning those really fine differences, the subtle gradients between pitches, accurately identifying specific notes, but also classifying chords, recognizing intervals, those building blocks of harmony and melody. That auditory precision is just crucial for accuracy, for musical integrity. You need to be sure the pitch you're hearing or singing or playing is the one you actually intend.
And then reading skills. I always think of this like learning a language. You start with the letters, the notes, then musical words, phrases, eventually whole stories.
That's a perfect analogy. And Triquetrae structures it quite clearly. They have what they call a fine zone. That's where you learn the letters, the note positions, how to recognize them. Then there's a build zone, which helps you understand how those notes combine into patterns, musical words, and phrases. It's about grasping the grammar and syntax of music. So yeah, like learning to read a story, but a musical one.
Makes sense. Let's talk rhythm skills next. The combination of note lengths and silences, right? Which, with pitch, creates those unique patterns.
Exactly. Rhythm is basically a pattern that repeats over a steady pulse or beat, usually measured within a bar, and the tempo, the speed of that pulse, is given by BPM beats per minute. That gives the musician a precise guide. It's the music's heartbeat.
Which leads us straight into tempo skills. The speed itself, expressed in BPM, and so important for getting the right style, the right character of a piece.
Yeah, and tempo isn't taught in isolation in Triquetrae. It's woven through all the learning zones. So, for example, in the build zone, you work on developing a really steady internal sense of beat. In the achieve zone, you focus on understanding and respecting the composer's intended tempo marking. And then in the explore and create zones, you're encouraged to actually experiment. Play with different tempos, see how it changes the feel, how a melody can sound totally different, slowed down or sped up.
Right. And finally, tonality skills. This is about the overall character, the sort of gravitational pull of the music established by the key.
That's a good way to put it, the tonal home. That sense is deepened progressively across the zones. You start studying different tonalities in the build zone, then maybe examine more complex chord patterns in the explore and develop zones. And even in the fine zone, you learn to perceive larger tonal patterns, to get an intuitive grasp of that central pull. It's like learning the distinct emotional landscape of different keys.
Wow. Okay, so bringing it all together,
Mhm.
what's the big takeaway for you listening today? These 14 skills, when you look at them collectively, they really do seem to build a holistic, deep musical understanding, way beyond just playing the notes.
And maybe think about the broader relevance, too. What is this really meticulous approach? Breaking something down, focusing on skill development, understanding, building resilience, critical thinking. What does that tell us about learning in any field, not just music? It really highlights the power of deconstructing something complex into its core parts and building mastery from the ground up, doesn't it?
That's a really powerful thought, and maybe something to leave you chewing on. We often call music a universal language, right? But we also know that what sounds good or right can vary hugely across cultures. So how might exploring these 14 skills, but through the lens of lots of different cultural musical traditions, how might that deepen our appreciation, not just of music itself, but maybe of human expression more broadly? Definitely something to mull over. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Triquetrae program and its really quite profound approach to music education.
Yeah, thanks for listening. We hope you maybe take a moment to reflect on how these deep understanding, skill mastery might apply in your own life, whatever you pursue.